Let's talk about the VA appraisal. So there's a common confusion between the VA appraisal and a home inspection. Let's clear this up now. When you're using a VA loan to purchase a property, one of the first steps after opening escrow is to order the VA appraisal. Now, your lender will make sure that it's ordered, but it's important for you to understand that the VA appraisal is not the same thing as your home inspection. Now, the reason for this confusion may lie in the fact that VA appraisers do perform a more in-depth look at the property than a normal appraiser would for another type of loan. For example, a VA appraiser must follow guidelines laid out by the Department of Veterans Affairs, which dictate that the home must meet certain minimum property requirements. Now, the main concentration of these minimum property requirements is to ensure that the property is livable, safe, and sanitary. Let's say, for example, that the hot water heater is bad and there's no hot water, or the furnace doesn't work so there's no heat. Or let's say the toilet has been removed in one of the bathrooms, or there are not the required carbon monoxide or smoke detectors present. Now, there's a good chance that in any of these scenarios, the appraiser will list these defects as mandatory repairs prior to closing on the property. Now, in most reasonable cases, the repairs will be minor enough to be able to negotiate with the seller for the completion prior to closing. In other cases, let's say with a bank-owned property, there is a chance that the seller will refuse to do any repairs. Regardless of the outcome, these minimum property requirements will need to be met prior to the buyer closing on the purchase. Now, the primary purpose of a VA appraisal, however, after ensuring it meets the minimum property requirements, is to appraise the property and submit their opinion of value to the lender. Now, this protects not only the lender by ensuring they're not lending more money than the property is worth, but it also protects the buyer by ensuring that they are not overpaying for the property. Now, let's say the appraisal value comes in lower than your agreed upon purchase price. There are several ways to proceed. The first, and the one we typically pursue, is to negotiate with the seller to lower the purchase price to meet the appraised value. Appraisals are independent and unbiased opinions of value, so it is highly likely that if one appraisal comes in low, then another appraiser will come up with a similar conclusion. Now, in this case, depending on the market conditions of the area, the buyer typically has some leverage in that the unbiased opinion of value from one appraiser recommends that the value is lower than your currently agreed upon purchase price. Also, the seller knows that the lender cannot lend based on a purchase price above the appraised value unless the buyer makes up the difference in value. Now, in the past, we've had great success with renegotiating the sales price in this scenario, and this is our first preference. Which brings us to the second option. The buyer can make up for the difference by themselves by bringing in their own money. Let's say a home appraised at $400,000 and the currently agreed upon purchase price is $410,000. Now, if the seller would not agree to lower the price or only agrees to lower it by an amount less than the difference, then the buyer can place their own money down to make the deal work. Another possible scenario is that the seller will meet the buyer halfway, so to speak. So they might be willing to drop the price by $5,000 so long as the buyer comes up with the other $5,000. Now, the next option is to file a dispute of the value by submitting a reconsideration of value request to the lender, who, if they believe the dispute has merit, will submit it along to the appraiser. Now, this is often a challenging process and it's often not successful, but it is nonetheless an option to pursue in the case that the previous options have not worked out. Now, the final option is for the buyer to walk away from the deal. If no agreement can be made with the seller on lowering the price, and the buyer does not wish to come up with a difference in value, and the reconsideration of value does not produce the desired results, then the last option is just to walk away from the deal. In this case, assuming the buyer has not removed their appraisal contingency, the buyer can typically back out with the minimum repercussions and recover their earnest money deposit. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the VA appraisal is not to be confused with a home inspection. An appraisal is required, however, a home inspection is not, although we highly recommend all buyers hire a home inspector when purchasing a property. With a home inspection, the inspector will conduct a much more in-depth inspection of the property and will typically use tools and knowledge above and beyond those that an appraiser would. We have another video about home inspections, so be sure to check that out if you have any more questions about that. If you have any other questions about VA appraisals or anything else real estate related in Southern California, give us a call or check out our website for tons of other great information on this and many other topics. I'll see you in the next video.